Welcome to CNY Decides. This is a joint venture of Central Current and WAER Syracuse Public Media, where we try to demystify the political process and give you insights into key races, political issues, and topics that hopefully you carried with you into the voting booth. I'm Bob Beck of WAER. Today I'm joined by Central Current's Chris Libonati. We have Eddie Velazquez and WAER's Scott Willis. We're going to discuss the primary election results and where we go from here. Thanks to all three of you for joining us. Eddie talked an awful lot about Bill Magnarelli and Mo Brown and how we expected that to be a very close race. It certainly lived up to expectations.
It certainly delivered. And yeah, so much so that we are still awaiting official results. We won't know. We won't know full counts until June 30th, or that is the deadline that the Onondaga County Board of Elections has. But yeah, it was highly competitive. It was a race of, with different shades of, big money, grassroots organizing. So there was a little bit of everything going on in there.
Did you sense it was going to be this close, Scott?
I think I did, although I didn't know it would come down to, virtual tie as we speak. With 82 votes currently separating them, and that will obviously change in the days and weeks ahead. It certainly makes it much more interesting to talk about right now. And it does show, I think, there is a divide among Democrats in that district who are comfortable with the status quo and Bill Magnarelli, a 28-year, Assembly veteran, and, an up-and-coming progressive in Mo Brown.
Chris, we were wondering going into this if the progressives could make a dent and, somebody who'd been there a long time could be vulnerable. It does seem like that did in fact happen.
Yeah, I think Mo has become a veteran of campaigns. I think it's almost a hallmark of the progressive movement in New York State and probably more broadly, but, I don't want to, make it overwrought, but that was a true victory of the Zohran Mamdani campaign. Was his campaign operation, and you kind of saw downstate how that played out this year, and I think upstate Mo, he's worked with Anna Kellis, Mary Kuhn for a little while. He also made himself a creature of the ledge at times, not in a disparaging way, in a good way. Like before he ran, he was going to meetings. I remember running into him 4 years ago. And so he familiarized himself with the system and really made himself a viable campaigner, I think. And that's a true hallmark of the kind of some of the younger progressives.
Eddie, you noticed something about this race where the votes were coming from. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So, I think technically and just broadly, when you look at early voting and mail-in ballots, you tend to think of voters who are most engaged, right? Like they care about the issues, they care about knowing the candidates and making sure that their vote is counted, rain or shine, right? But some of that, when we were seeing the results trickle in Tuesday night, Bill Magnarelli ended up, winning the share of those more engaged voters, if you want to call it that. And on election day, the younger crowd, which is what Mo's campaign was like, those were the demographics that they were saying were the election day voters. They mostly came out in support of Brown, and that's why we're where we're at with such a close race. So it was interesting to see that dynamic. And just the different types of engagement across voters, of all demographics, certainly.
Scott, this was a tremendous risk for Brown to get in this race because he's giving up the county legislature seat. So we'll see what happens on Tuesday, but he could very well be out of politics or at least a seat for a little while. Why did you think he wanted to go for this? He knew the risk was out there.
I think it's just part of his nature. I mean, he is a risk taker. He is not afraid to jump in and take those chances. And, he did that when he ran for legislature. Like Chris said, he kind of knew the system a little bit, so that gave him maybe an advantage. This was a pretty big risk, having only served a term basically in the county ledge, and now you're jumping up to the state level politics and taking on an entrenched incumbent. It is a risk, and he, I think has, come up pretty big considering, how close this race is in challenging this, established incumbent.
Hey, Chris, can I ask you on the other side, though, are you at all surprised that Magnarelli is, he can still win, and he made it close? Because here was my thinking going in. Brown's the one that's the upstart. He's campaigning. This is June. Nobody comes out and votes in June. The voting numbers, I'm sure, when we get the final tally, there weren't a lot of folks that voted in this election. So that had to be Brown's advantage going in. And so for Magnarelli to be still hanging around, a surprise?
That's a good question. My guess, I'm just in my head making some predictions, my guess going into Election Day was Magnarelli around 53-47. So it was probably until about Monday. But all my indicators were kind of just about the other way. And then I talked to a few people who I think ultimately kind of had their numbers wrong, but had given me some indicators the other way. I was like, okay, I think Mo could pull this out. And I think ultimately there's a lot of name recognition. Magnarelli has done a lot for the community and, brought a lot of money back to the region, had a lot of institutional support. I mean, Mark Spatafor, who, the labor representative, has backed Mo in a lot of his elections, did not formally backed Magnarelli in this one. Mo was a little bit out. I think he had 2 local electeds endorse him. It was City Auditor Alex Marion and Common Councilor Hannah Ehrenreich. Oh, and then I guess State Senator Rachel May. I mean, very much lacked institutional support as people view it right now. So I think this is in that kind of margin of error, this is kind of where it should have ended up. And it was always, I think the advantage here is just that Mo was always going to be able to drive people out and had volunteers for his campaign that were young and active, frankly.
Did the young and active people in other races, Eddie, make a difference? And how did their nights go?
Certainly. I feel like, as Scott has already kind of talked about, Brown was part of a solidarity slate, so which is a group of candidates all backed by the Syracuse chapter of the Democratic Socialists of America. And, so that they ran on sort of these kitchen table issues that have been extremely popular elsewhere, like in New York City. Another one of those issues that I know the Brown campaign was keenly focused on was artificial intelligence data centers. So all of those things really resonated with the electorate, but especially I think those are issues that just kind of skew younger a little bit. And for example, for Joe Bennett, he won his race pretty handily against Bill Kinney, an opponent who's sort of part of the old guard of Democratic politics in the county. So I think it really ended up panning out that way, where younger voters came out in droves and supported the affordability slate, so that group of candidates.
And that's, Mo Brown's current seat right now. So, whoever wins that seat will succeed him in the legislature.
Chad Ryan did fight somebody off in his race, but that's probably a name recognition thing, we think?
I believe so. He survived a challenge from Tammy Honeywell, who was part of that slate, that progressive slate, 58 to 42%. Again, like Mo Brown, he's been in, not even one term, and has that some of that institutional knowledge also, kind of through relatives. His cousin served in the seat prior, and then, another family member served, for decades prior to that. So that that name has been around for a long time.
We thought, Chris, there was a possibility of an upset in the Common Council. Helen Hudson, who's been around a long time, wins that sort of handily. Your takeaway on that one?
Yeah, I know Eddie said he wasn't as shocked at that outcome. Hudson has a ton of name recognition. Has been around for a very long time. Has a lot of institutional support. It is a bit of an outlier for the cycle, and I think ultimately it did come down to name recognition. I mean, Chayla Surratt, very well known in the community, has her own local business. I thought ran a real campaign, and I ultimately think name recognition just won out there.
We also saw Tom DiNapoli, by the way, win a statewide race. A lot of us wondered if there would be any inroads there, but any thoughts on that from anyone?
Yeah, that is I'm going to throw out an anecdote here, but a longtime Democratic operative in New York State once told me that Tom DiNapoli is a guy who will show up for you if you are a Democratic candidate, no matter where you are. And, that does bear out, when you're out and about covering events as a reporter, that is a statewide elected official that you will find, at these events. So I think, he's a hard campaigner, and I do think that, he's been in office for quite a while. And yeah, the name recognition, again, I think really, really was a key advantage there. And yeah, just a hard-working campaign for sure.
Okay, who wants to take this question first? Maybe I'll look at you, Scott, and see if you do. Sneaky races or something you saw that got your attention?
Nothing comes to mind. I know Eddie and Chris have been following this a lot more closely than I have, so maybe they have more insights than I do, but, feel free to jump in.
Chris?
Yeah, I think one of the more interesting things that we'll look back on here is the spending in the Magnarelli race. Outspent Brown 5-1. On the day that Central Current wrote and Eddie wrote about Mo exploring a race, Magnarelli had a $260,000+ advantage in campaign funds. I mean, I think Mo was under $2,000 in his account.
Wow.
This race was so close. Like, how much does money matter up here if you run a real campaign? And it will matter, but I think that was the thing that stood out. I don't know that there's a broad takeaway quite yet, but I do think it merits exploring.
Yeah, and in that sense, I in just my interviews with the Brown campaign, he did not disclose the number, but he did tell me that there was a magic number that the campaign had arrived at and said, if we can raise this much money, I know exactly how to allocate it, where it's going to go, and what it's going to do for us. And after a little while, you start getting sort of diminishing returns on your investment on TV, on lawn signs, and things like that. So that was something that he mentioned to me, that Brown mentioned to me, that was like, yeah, in my experience running the campaign for Anna Kellis, for State Assembly in Ithaca, some of the local campaigns as well, we always arrive at this magic number where we're like, we need this much to win. And, kind of sounds like they could have arrived at that number.
So we know who's in the mix, Scott. We look ahead now, for the most part, we know who's in the mix. We look ahead to the election in November. What's your takeaway here?
Well, I think, this will be a test of, regardless of who wins the assembly race, of who, can stand up against the Republican candidate in that race. And, I think they will have to appeal to the, of course, broader electorate, but because you have obviously Democrats and very engaged Democrats voting in this primary, but now you have, Republicans and unenrolled voters, which make up, the second largest voting bloc in the county, 94,000 roughly unenrolled voters, and they could go either direction. That's the big unknown, I think, going into for any of these candidates, after a primary is, how will these folks vote? come November.
Chris?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be really interesting. Sean Fiato, was appointed to the Ledge when she ran that race by County Executive Ryan McMahon. I think ultimately lost to Chad Ryan in that seat.
Right.
And I think Sean, has a community-oriented background, which is, I think, one of the few ways that one of these candidates could lose that race, right, by someone who runs a tough campaign, has a lot of community support. I'm not saying that will happen at all or that I think that will happen, but that is the path, in that assembly race.
Eddie?
Yeah, to piggyback off of what Chris was saying, I see that as kind of being the more contested of all the races in the general. As a former resident of Park Avenue, I've heard all about Sean Fiato's work in the neighborhood, so I know folks out there really do support her. And I expect that to be the one for that race to be the one with sort of the most news coming out of it.
Eddie, Chris, Scott, thanks for joining us.
You're welcome.
And thank you for joining us for this and all of our episodes of CNY Decides. The Maxwell School of Citizenship and Public Affairs at Syracuse University is a supporter of CNY Decides. The series was a joint effort by Central Current and WAER. An extended version of this segment is available at waer.org.